We've spoken about the passions, and I think we'll leave it at that. There's more we could say, but we're getting too deep into lots of things, and we could have discussion about various things. But remember, what the psychiatrist is dealing with is the impediments to freedom. I'll say more about that later. He's talking about the impediments to freedom, those emotional states which impede our freedom. And Lord alone, haven't we got enough of that in the world? I remember on one occasion scolding relatives of mine who was not too pleased about me scolding another relative about the overreaction to the situation they're in. One of those people that sort of flings their arms and throws things, and it's a terrible life, and the world's got against me. I said, it's not what she's doing, it's the fact that the way she's reacting was childish. And our education should be towards that, towards helping us understand those things. But it's all what we're dealing with in counselling people is usually the passion, the states of passions, or the emotional order. I'll say something about the emotion in a minute. The passionate states, and the way we should be reacting, not the way we are acting, but the way we ought to act as a result of our education. The emotional order, by the way, we've been speaking about passions. The emotion, we deal with what's in the will, which flows down into the passions, the order of the passions. So it's flowing from the intellectual life to the sensitive life. That's what the emotional order is. Moved from. In other words, our passion states are moved from what's up in here. Now we come to intellective knowledge as found in man. Why as found in man? Because it's found in other beings higher than man. Granted that there are other beings higher than man. For instance, God's knowledge is intellective. He doesn't need passions because he sees all in the concept. What we have to see is the individual concrete and the universal. But the order of angelic beings, or intelligences as the ancients called them, the immaterial substances, etc., such as God, angels, etc., they see all in the concept. With the concept of man, they know Jenna, and they know Susan, and they know Betty, they know them all in the one concept. Their intellects are very powerful. Just remind people of that. I've seen it in the classroom, but I've said that be careful, don't touch the Ouija board. And you see one student taking a sneaking look at the other, and you know darn well they've been tampering with the darn thing. I told you, I think, about the woman in Erie, Pennsylvania. She told me that her friend's daughter would never go down into the basement. And the mother was quite upset about this, and notice she seemed to be veering away from the basement all the time. Never go down there when she wanted her to. And so she forced her one day, come on, you're coming down there with me. So the girl obediently went down with the mother. She said, look, it's doing it again. There's a Ouija board, and the things start to move from its own operation. The mother witnessed all that.
You said before that hope was one of the irascible appetites?
Hope, yes.
You mentioned hope.
Yeah, hope that you can overcome the evil, the difficult evil, yeah.
Is that different than hope as a theological virtue?
Oh, yes. Well, you're hoping for the good, which is difficult to get, yes, the same again. However, I was going to say something here. I'll say more about those when we come to the theological virtues. But anyway, this woman saw the thing moving, the hand moving. Then she was telling me also about another friend over there. By the way, these are workers in Father Gruner's place. And the other woman, she said, told her daughter, son rather, to get rid of those sluttish records that he was listening to. And she packed them up and put them out for the garbage men to take, and saw the garbage men take them. That evening when the son came home, he said, thanks for not throwing my records out, Mum. They were back in the room. I mean, I can't swear to the truth of that. All I can say is what the woman told me. But I have damn good reason to believe it could be true. Or it could be true, yes. There's no difficulty in that, no problem there. However, what students don't understand is that the intellect of one angel is greater than the intellect than the whole human race. Powerful intellect. So when you're touching the Ouija board, you're playing with a very, very dangerous and fantastic intellect. You're not playing with it, it's playing with you. Don't forget that. Please remind students of that. They can lead them down the road of perdition quite easily. So, my friends, the intellect has 5 basic points about it, qualities if you like, to show you how great the intellect is above the senses. Whatever the senses can do, the intellect can do. Now let's look at this diagram again, like the 5 fingers of the hand. 2, 3, 4, 5. There's sense consciousness. What the heck is going on there? 5 sense and the imagination, which is the storehouse. Of what comes through the senses. Storehouse of what comes through sense consciousness. Then there's the cogitative power in man and its storehouse. Sensitive memory. Now, the intellect can be conscious of the relationship between these senses and the relationship of sense consciousness. As I've expressed it here, it can know its object in its presence, but not directly. Goes through the senses. Let's go through the senses. Then what comes there, it can store it. It can store, just the same as we can store in the sense life. Then we can know unsensed intentions. We can know the values of things. We can know the relationships of things. This is singular, this is universal, etc. It can know all the relationships. Then it can store the values, etc. So the intellect can do those 5 things. One page yes, here it is, page 278 in Regis Epistemology leaves all this, leads into this, gives the information here. So the higher power, the intellect, is more perfect in its act, for this one power can do what the 5 senses can do, but in a higher manner. So the intellect is a greater power. But foolish men operating outside their field of expertise, like Dr. Little, said that there's only just one slight difference between an animal, brute animal, and man. I'd say the difference is infinite. And I use the word infinite with its proper meaning. Far superior to what the animals can do. So, now intellective consciousness we'll speak about first. Just as there's sensitive consciousness, so there's intellective consciousness. But the sensitive consciousness is necessarily separate from the other senses. But the intellective consciousness isn't. It's still the same intellective power. Now, what does consciousness mean? Supposing I say, I know that 2 plus 2 equals 4. Now, the object of this act of knowing is 2 plus 2 equals 4. That's the object. I am conscious conscious that I know that 2 plus 2 equals 4. In other words, we could just put it this way. I know that 2 plus 2 equals 4. The object of this act of know is this act of knowledge here. That's called a reflex action. It's also called, Cardinal John Henry Newman wrote a book on the grammar of assent. It's also called the assent of the intellect. I assent to this. I know that 2 and 2 equal 4, and that judgment I assent to. There it is there. It's the assent. In other words, I agree with it. So that consciousness means knowing at the same time. Con meaning together or at the same time, whichever we like to put it. And scio is the Latin word I know. We get the word science from that, of course, obviously. I know at the same time. I know this at the same time I know that I know this. That's what it says. So the assent is an agreement. An agreement with that. I know it and I agree with it, if you like.
Yeah. So if you believe something is reasonable, you're assenting to it.
Well, somewhat. It sounds reasonable, that you don't necessarily assent to it. For instance, if you told me a story about something that happened somewhere and you think the reason was this, I'd say, well, it sounds reasonable, but I don't assent to it. I may not agree that it did happen, but I'd say that it sounds reasonable. And many persons use that. There was a professor when I was at Ottawa, one of the professors who had been in a monastery for about 10 years and came out, and now he never actually got his doctorate. Which reminds me, he phoned me recently and I haven't returned his call. But he, one day he said, see, in Ottawa, the faculty was 50% English speaking and 50% French Canadian. And there was, when I got there in 1969, I could see some division in the department. And because I was the most fluent person in French and English amongst the English people, the French assumed I was one of them. But the English people, most of whom were Americans, by the way, they assumed I was one of them. And frankly, I was. Because they were more traditional in philosophy than the French Canadians were. They were playing around with all sorts of stuff. And 3 of them were living with women without being married to them, etc., etc., etc. So anyway, the big thing is what's the point I was going to make? Oh yes, one day Larry said, you know what those darn French have done now? I said, no, what have they done, Larry? He told me. I said, Larry, do you know this to be a fact, or are you assuming this? I started to wake up. He was the political monger of the department, or the faculty. It was the full faculty of philosophy. And he said, well, it makes sense, doesn't it? It's reasonable. Yeah, it is reasonable. But did they do it? I don't know. I can't swear to it. Well, why are you spreading it as if it is true? You see the point? You know, it may not, it does sound reasonable, but not necessarily is it true. It could be, but not necessarily. So the human knower is a complex of immanent activities. All these are immanent activities taking place within the mind. In fact, it's even more immanent than lots of other things, because it all takes place within the same power, the mind. So this intellectual consciousness is done by the intellect, not by another power, as the sense consciousness does it. So, if it required another power, always, if it required another power, then you'd require another power to know that equality. Then you'd know another power to consent to that, another power for that. You'd have to go to infinity. And we can't go to infinity. But there's no need to with a spiritual power like the intellect, as we'll prove it is later. So the same power does that. Now, I cannot know the intellect. I know, you're all sitting there now and you think, well, I know that I've got an intellect, yes. But you can't know that unless it's active first. The intellect is a pure power. I cannot see anything until I get a form of colour come into the sight. I cannot know anything with the intellect until the intellect is first formed by some being from outside it. Once the intellect is just as sight is a pure potency for all visible things, hearing is a pure potency for all audible things. Although we're going to be careful here because it's more or less, some people have a defect in the organ and they can't see something because they're colourblind, as we often say. Or maybe the hearing's a bit defective. But the intellect is pure potency in the order of intelligibles. And every being that is intelligible, if not to us, at least to God. Non quoad nos, sed quoad Deum. Not as far as we're concerned, but as far as God is concerned, yes. We must always have that distinction in mind. Now, the intellect is a pure potency in the order of intelligibles. And it must come into act because form is the reason of knowledge, not potency, unless the intellect actually becomes something. In itself, the intellect is a nothing. It's just a power of the soul. But once it becomes something, it becomes tree. And to have the form of a tree is to become a tree. But you remember the difference? The tree out there has the form physically. The tree in here has it supraphysically, above the physical order. So I'm not tied down to being a tree. I can change and become a lion, become a tiger, become a stone, become another person through knowledge. But the intellectual knowledge requires that it be actualized in order to know itself. It cannot reflect upon itself until it's actualized, till it becomes something. And it becomes something by having the form of something. All knowledge is becoming another, remember? Sight becomes the colour. Intellect becomes the tree. Nothing, the intellect must become other by reason of the form of another. Remember that poem written by Shelley, my student in Ottawa? I once was a lion roaming the jungles afar. I once was an eagle flying and soaring above the clouds. When I talked about becoming other, through the intellect we can become all things. By having the form of other, we can become other things. We're other things, but in a better way than the other thing is. Because we're not restricted to that. Just a sec. We're not restricted to that. I can become a lion without being restricted to a lion, but a lion has the same form, but it's restricted to being a lion.
Does the intellect change?
Pardon?
Does the intellect change?
Oh yes, through these forms. By receiving forms of others all the time. It changes. Look, what am I now? I can be a class of students. Now I can, even through my imagination, I can become a marsupial in Australia. Little Benedict Vanari wants to know, is there an animal in Australia which is not a marsupial? I couldn't answer it. The mother might have answered, perhaps a dingo. I got to go and look it up when I get home. I have to carry my Australian encyclopedia with me every day now. So, like in 1958 when I first came to North America, they had a library on the steamship Orsovo. And the fellow said to me in the library, he said, everybody now, they've left Australia, they all want to read about Australia, he said. All want to know about their own country. So, we're talking about intellective consciousness. The same power does the act of reflection whereby it exercised acts of consciousness. It's the same intellect that knows the intellect. The intellect knows the intellect once it's committed to something. but it has to be moved into act first. Then we know the object, then we know the act. Its act is to become other than itself. We have to reflect on that.
Excuse me, that's through the imagination?
No. Oh, it operates on the imagination for its object, but it doesn't know, it goes above, rises above that. But it still must have the image in the imagination to work on. The intellect always has it. If I change to knowing a lion, I can have an image of a lion now. We always have to have an image. There's no such thing as imageless thought, as some people have asked that question. It always operates by abstracting from the singular. It's made to operate through the sense power. So, immanence and objectivity compared on page 37. Objectivity. Here's the principle. Acts, habits, and powers are specified or distinguished by their formal objects. By the form in the object. Remember that. What is geometry? The object of geometry is shape. All shapes as found in material things. That's what geometry is about. What is mathematics? Its object is number. Either discrete, like arithmetic, broken up into 1, 2, 3, or continuous, like geometry, stretched out lines and triangles. So, the object of the senses is the singular. Don't ever forget that. The object of the senses is the singular. This man, this stork, this bunny rabbit, etc. This rock, this extended colour for sight, this sound. But the object of the intellect is the universal. Man, dog, tree, rock, colour, sound, etc. I feel a little stupidity at telling you this, but I'll say why in a minute. I was in bed with the flu in London, England, and I bought a book of Maritain. And Jacques Maritain was the great French philosopher who has transmitted a lot of great Thomistic stuff to us. He was the one that, with his Jewish girlfriend, a most beautiful woman, went to Léon Blois and said, Monsieur Blois, Jacques and I, her boyfriend and herself, this slim, fair-haired boy, were thinking of studying Thomistic philosophy. What do you think? His words are very famous. Mademoiselle, il n'y a que deux philosophies, le Thomisme et le Bolshevisme. There are only two philosophies, Thomism and Bolshevism. That was the famous remark by Léon Blois. They'd been studying with Bergson, who was a great philosopher, but he went wrong. Anyway, I was reading this book. This man, Jacques Maritain, after Raissa, who must have been a beautiful woman, poet, etc., and she died, and he went to live in the Little Brothers of Jesus in France. He went to live in the monastery there. And they say you can always look up to Jacques' room and you can see the light burning day and night. He's written a massive amount of books. Two friends of mine were friends of his and studied with him, Dr. Donald and Dr. Idella Gallagher. And when I was in London, I was in bed with the flu. And I bought this book and I read where the intellect can have knowledge of the singular. I nearly fell out of bed. Good God, I said. So when I got back to Sydney, after wandering all over Europe for weeks, months, Greece, etc., I said to Father Woodbury, I said, Maritain said, he said, oh, you found it, did you? He said, in 1936 he wrote that, he knew it exactly. He said, Maritain went wrong. The intellect by its very nature has as its object the universal. Yet, he said, it can know the singular directly. No, it cannot. It knows the singular by a reflex action, indirectly. It knows it only, A thing cannot go against its own essence, its own nature. Nothing can work against its own nature. I can't make the power of sight see sound. Oh, I can see an oscillograph which results as caused by sound, etc. But I can't see sound or I can't hear colour. Even the girl in France that they tried in the last century or so, the early part of last century I think it was, they tried to teach her, she was blind from birth, they tried to teach her what the colours were. And one day she said, I've got it now, I know what it is, I know exactly what you're getting at now. Red is like the sound of a trumpet. She didn't have any idea at all. She just likened it to the importance of a sound of trumpet. But she couldn't have an idea of colour. Impossible. She'd never experienced colour. Remember Helen Keller? Her senses stopped her from having a lot of knowledge. So what they do, they have to work through touch. And overcame a lot of her problems through the understanding of the sense of touch. A fantastic effort, if ever there was one. So, the singular is always this. The intellect, its object, is always the universal. The intellect can know any being whatsoever, but as it is universal. Beings higher than man are known negatively, that is, by comparison with bodily things around us. What is the spiritual? A non-material thing, an immaterial thing. We have to name it from a negative way. We are made to know forms as they're found in bodies. And if we don't know the forms as they're found in bodies, the only thing we can do is compare it to a body and say it's in other words, without matter, immaterial, non-material. So the object of the senses is always singular or concrete. And the object of the intellect is always universal or abstract. Now those terms, notice what they're saying. When we say something is universal, we're saying that it's this. Unum excuse me, versus alia. It's a block of reality, or one block, one reality, if you like. Unum, one. But with a reference to others. That's what the universal is. It's a block of reality, a piece of reality, if you like. It's found in here, but identified with things out there. That's what the universal is, a shorthand way of saying those things. You know, the founders of our language, when you come to think of it, they're amazing. The life of a language, how it forms amongst the people. I was reading in Thorold Rogers, 6 Centuries of Work and Wages, a fantastic book. It's rarer than hen's teeth. And it deals with work and wages from the 9th century to the 15th. And he says there, oh, wait dear, it might have been in the other one, another book by Father Walsh, the 13th, the greatest of centuries, one of those books anyway. He says that even the housewives, they'd write down their orders. The figure 6, then OEUFS, the Z, eggs, 6 eggs. They'd write it in Latin. They'd write it in Latin. Yet when you read things about the people and you'd say there were a gross lot of filthy people in the 13th century by judging them by the sewers or something like that. But there was a greatness in here. And in Paris University, when they gave lectures sometimes or had debates, be 5,000 to 10,000 people in front of them listening to the debates. And Paris became so difficult for the English that they got fed up with travelling and fed up with trying to get accommodation and fed up with trying to send letters home, that they founded Oxford University. Because those at Oxford today with extraordinary pride wouldn't admit that. But it's easily documented. I met one lad at a telephone. He came from the telephone and I needed some direction in Oxford. I say, he said, I don't know what you mean by that. I nearly fell over. I've never heard such an accent. It was extraordinary. It became typical of people attending the Oxford University. That's enough of that. Anyway, that's what the universal means. And the individual means it's the undividable. Somewhere in his work, and I can't find it, St. Thomas said, you divide matter, the bodily things, you keep dividing it till what you get when you keep dividing is no longer a body. That's in the 13th century. It took Dalton, about 500 years later to discover the atomic theory. St. Thomas has that in his works. The same as the principle of acceleration of motion. You find that in Galilei and other people. What did he say there? He said, when you approach the term of an action, you approach it with a greater or an increasing rate of acceleration. 13th century. I wish I could get time to write an article on those, but those men weren't as dumb as they're made out to be by the ignoramuses. A lovely book, The 13th, the Greatest of Centuries, by Father Thomas, I think it's Tom again, Walsh. Another one, The Popes and Science, I think it is. They're I've got them. I've forgotten the last title, The Popes on Science or something like that. I published an article, The Church on Capital Punishment, and people are shocked when they hear that the Pope ordered the execution of a cardinal's chamberlain. Then he ordered the execution of the cardinal himself. Very surprising to some people. No pope was ever condemned to capital punishment. And people say, John Paul II did. No, he didn't. He merely said it's not needed in our times. But he also states in his work that the state has the right. And of course, we've got the kids at the university saying, what is it? Oh, the poor soul, what about rehabilitation? This is exactly St. Thomas's words. To speak thus is to argue frivolously. And it's in the Summa Contra Gentiles, Book 3, Chapter 146, halfway through it. The chapters are only short. From chapter 140 to 146. They're a must-read for anybody dealing with punishment of any kind. You look to the good of one man by rehabilitating himself and ignore the good of society. Look at the murders today. When I was a boy, there was one murder in Australia. Moxley. I've forgotten who he murdered. A couple or something, or one. I've forgotten now who it was. But I saw his brother pass us one day at Brighton Sands on Botany Bay, the beachfront. And people said, oh, that's the brother of Moxley. There he is, that's the brother of Moxley. It was a terrible thing. But if they saw what we see here in Buffalo, the murder capital of the United States, I think people would, their pants would drop off. I hope not. I hope not, of course. That might be going too far. Now, and then abstract. What's the result of the universal has this property, it's abstract. Abstract. Attractor. Tractare in Latin means to draw, to pull or draw. Drawn away from. But it's hard to say abstract, so an S is slipped in. Abstract. So, there it is. The universal means one towards others. Yeah.
When I am sitting and I'm being a lion, I'm thinking lion, I'm becoming a lion.
Just a minute now, hang on.
Okay, a tree.
A tree, okay, that's better. I was a little afraid for a minute.
I'm not being, I'm really looking at the universal though, I'm not.
You've got the universal there, but you we might be more conscious of what's in the imagination, the figure of a lion.
Oh, okay, all right.
You see? The imagination and the intellect are working together. I think I told you, didn't I, about the missionary that came face to face with a big lion in Africa? You know,
tell
Oh,
us.
but do tell us.
Do I detect a little cynicism here? He said, "Oh my goodness, all is up with me now." He said, "This lion's going to kill me and eat me." So he knelt down. He said, "I'm going to die praying." Knelt down, closed his eyes, joined his hands, and he's praying. He became conscious of the fact that nothing had happened. So he opened one eye. There's the lion kneeling down, praying with his hands joined. "Oh, thank God, the Lord has converted the lion." The lion says, "Can't you shut up? You can see I'm saying grace before meals." I told that at the wedding, and the poor little Jesuit who had said the opening prayer was sitting there, and he's going like this to me. "No." I said it was him, you see. "No, I'd never been in Africa." He said, he took me seriously. But when the audience heard it, this was Stephen Creason's wedding, Joe. And when the people, when he saw the reaction, he sort of sat down and kept quiet. But anyway, so much for that. But remember what the universal is. Don't be like one friend who studied with Woodbury and said he never said what the universal was. I thought, how's it possible to sit in the class by Woodbury? Because he was very active in the classroom. How's it possible to sit in the class and not hear that he defined the universal? It's a block of reality, found in many, identified with each, and multiplied in them. That's all in your text here.
We don't have the text yet. At least I don't.
I sent it out. Did you
Yeah,
get
I
it?
got it.
I never got it.
No. By the way, page 35 I'll send out again. Just page 35. I've just added two or three little sections to it. I thought it might be appeal to you. It's not utterly necessary, but however. So, but the immanence, it all remains within us. We receive from outside, but it all remains within us. But what goes on in the intellect, even though it's fed by the internal senses, nevertheless is going on inside the intellect. Remember that. It all comes from outside. We're tied to bodies, whether we like it or not, objectively. All our knowledge comes from bodily things around us. We might have in our sensitive memory, we've got, well, I saw a tigerlon, a cross between a tiger and a lion. Last time I was there, they said they died, but I saw them when they were alive. I got pictures of them. I had them in my office. I don't know where they are at home now, in one of my 100 or so boxes. And they had a cross between a lion. The way they got them to mate, by the way, was to take the sound of one, the female mating call, which one was the female now, I can't remember, and what they did, the tiger was the father and the lion was the female. They got the female's purring growl, which is a sort of a mating call, and induced the male to have conjugal union. So the thing was, I've forgotten the point I was making now, but we are tied to reality. And if we must have the form of tigerlon, or because of the compositive union which can be performed by the imagination, you can imagine a lion with stripes, can't you? You see, we can compose or divide in the imagination. Sometimes that leads us into error. However, how vast is the object of the intellect? Can it know all things? It can know all bodily things as universal directly. It can know all things superior to man, but by way of analogy, negation, and remotion. That is, likey, notty, and mori. The beauty of God, for instance, is like the beauty of a tree, but it's not the beauty of a tree, it's more than the beauty of a tree. Woodbury used to use porridge. He used to say, God's goodness is better than the goodness of porridge. You might sit down and say, I'm hungry this morning. He'd say, he had some funny things at times, because he always had a twinkle in his eye, and you knew he was trying to pull our legs too. So then we come to immanence and versus objectivity. The immanence means it remains within the intellect, and the objectivity means it's about things outside the intellect. And there seems to be a conflict between the two. What we know is outside the intellect, but it's known immanently, We do the knowing, we benefit from the knowing. Now that's such a big subject, we'll have to stop there and we'll take that up next class. For those who came late, I do want to thank you for the cards you sent and for the good wishes and prayers. I'm deeply grateful to you for them. I went into the emergency room, as I explained to some, because of a loss of blood, a great loss of blood. And they started feeding me folic acid and all sorts of things, and I'm taking it even now. And the vitamin B tablets, 100 milligrams, and I thought, boy, that'll make me jumpy. But I needed that encouragement. And I was well looked after on the 6th floor up here. And I told some of my jokes to the nurses, and I flirted with them. I got along well. There were some wonderful folks. One woman there was always, one of the nurses was, "Hi, how you, Tiger?" She started to call, I'd call them Tiger, so she started to call me Tiger.
I called the hospital and I said, "How's Dr. Waters doing?" And they said, "He took a turn for the nurse."
I think that deserves a clap. That's when I was in hospitals about 20 years ago. Dr. Human, I said to him, "I'm trying to get some exercise." "What, are you chasing the nurses?" he said. Thank you, everybody. Thank you again for your prayers and what you did. If I didn't thank somebody individually, please forgive me. I'm just so busy I can't keep up. I'm trying to catch up. What happened to my computer while I was in hospital? There must be 150 new messages there.
That's right.
Yeah. I'm going to have